Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Aotearoa, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora, Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades, Mr. Bradbury if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's show, the political panel all-stars tonight are Māori Party President John Tamihere, Stuff Business journalist Dita De Boni, Labour Party MP Camilla Belich, and Wātea's indomitable press gallery journalist, the mighty Claudette Hauiti. Tonight's one-on-one in 10 is the Executive Director of Greenpeace, Dr. Russell Norman. Shout out to Kiwi Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. Your comments will appear on screen as we go. Shout out to our Wātea Facebook, Rover and Sky TV whānau. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, this week the Prime Minister, tired of bashing teenagers on welfare and decided instead to attack the unions for striking against his terrible policies. Apparently, it's come as a shock to the Prime Minister that all the public servants his policies and cutbacks have been abusing are all going on a mega strike. In an almost Trumpian level of delusion, the Prime Minister had the audacity of blaming the unions for, and I quote, prioritising politics over patients. I'm sorry, who underfunded public health and gave millions in contracts to the private health sector? It wasn't the bloody unions. The Prime Minister blaming unions for striking against his terrible policies is like a drug dealer criticising you for being addicted. Perhaps the PM should stick to bashing teenagers on welfare because they can't really fight back and punching down is more his style. Remember, he's wealthy and he's sorted. Talking of surprises, the New Zealand Herald and Central Auckland business community were shocked to learn this week that massive cuts in homelessness funding has generated more homelessness. What did they think was going to happen? This government have cut food services to Auckland City Mission, cut outreach programs for the homeless, and made emergency housing more difficult to obtain. What the Christ did they think those actions would bring about? Let me get this straight. Did the New Zealand Herald and the Central Auckland business community think that by cutting all those safety nets, that a libertarian user-pays utopia would spring from the CBD where consumers would frolic and the free market flourish while the poor and broken were made invisible? Heads up to the New Zealand Herald and Central Auckland business community. This is the cruel government you elected. Watching the social carnage they have unleashed washed up on your streets, shutting down your ability to make money is a wonderful irony, isn't it? You made your bed and now lots of homeless people are sleeping in it. And finally, in this week's War on News, research over the weekend shows scientists deeply concerned about massive methane seeps occurring in Antarctica. Methane, which traps around 80 times more heat than carbon dioxide, is escaping from cracks in the Antarctic seabed as the region warms, with new seeps being discovered at an astonishing rate, raising fears that future global warming predictions have been horribly underestimated. Brothers and sisters, we're all going to die on a burning planet thanks to the lies of the petro-industrial complex and their polluter mates. To quote the great warrior, poet, oracle Mike Hosking, happy days. The political panel all-stars are up shortly, whānau, but first, this week's one-on-one in 10 with the Executive Director of Greenpeace, Dr. Russell Norman. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Good evening, Martin. How you going?
Very well, my friend. Russell, before we get to this insane decision by the government on methane, can we please just rewind to last week's damning 3-yearly update from the Ministry of the Environment and Stat New Zealand that warned New Zealand's oceans are warming 34% faster than the global average, and that New Zealand, $180 billion worth of housing is at risk of flooding. What did you make of that report, and are we in denial about the ramifications?
Yeah, so that report was focused particularly on the interaction between the marine environment and climate change. And so they were looking at rising sea levels, increased storm events, impact on particularly coastal housing, but also inundation for inland areas, which it's going to get flooding. But it also was interesting for looking at the impact in terms of climate change on the fishing industry and the kind of negative consequences of that. The other interesting thing about it was that it did also talk about the impact of things like bottom trawling, which the New Zealand fishing industry is very keen on to destroy deep sea coral environments. We know that the orange roughy fishery, the largest orange roughy fishery, has just collapsed. Yeah. And they've had to cut the quota to that. And so it's all just one thing on top of another. In terms of the warming, New Zealand, the waters around New Zealand are warming faster than elsewhere. And that's kind of amplifying the effect on us of climate change.
I mentioned in the opening monologue that scientists are concerned about massive methane seeps in Antarctica. The fear is that we are crossing tipping points in the biosphere that could cause cascade shutdowns of essential environmental systems. Why are these concerns, which represent existential threats, being completely ignored?
Essentially because our kind of political process is dominated by existing power structures, right? So, I mean, you're seeing the fossil fuel industry is having a huge influence in terms of governance, particularly in the United States. Obviously, we're seeing it particularly there. But of course, in New Zealand, it's agribusiness is the fossil fuel of our economy. It's this kind of dominant resource sector, and they're having a huge impact on climate policy here. And so, we live in a democracy. We have certain democratic rights and freedoms, and people do get to vote once every 3 years. But in between those votes, these very powerful vested interests have a huge impact in basically undermining democratic rights because they just have it's just the nature of political economy and a capitalist system that those very dominant industries have a huge impact on government decision-making. And it's very hard for ordinary people to influence government decision-making on a day-to-day basis, day-to-day way, in the same way that when you have big corporate lobby groups who are knocking on doors every day of every week. It's just this huge power imbalance around government decision-making.
Let's turn to the government's decision on methane, which effectively allows corporate dairy farmers just completely off the hook. Greenpeace has described this as Luxon goes full Trump with climate-denying methane back down. What are your concerns?
Well, methane's about half of New Zealand's emissions, 48% or thereabouts. And so basically, if you're saying you're only going to cut emissions by 14% by 2050, basically you're saying you're not going to do anything about climate change in terms of cutting emissions. So, I mean, it's basically, it's Trumpian in the sense that it's effectively climate denialism, because you're basically saying the biggest pollutant produced by New Zealand, which is methane, we're not going to do anything about. The thing about methane is that it's extremely powerful warming, much in the short term, much more powerful than carbon dioxide. But the great thing about it is that if you cut your methane emissions now, then you do start to get, down the track 12 years or so, you get significant drops in methane levels. And so it gives you the opportunity to actually pull out of the climate change death spiral in a faster way than carbon dioxide cuts do. So a lot of the scientists globally are saying, hey, look, methane actually is actually really could be one of the solutions, because if we can cut methane levels, then we can get pretty rapid reductions in warming. So Luxon's doing the exact opposite of that.
The Climate Change Commission recommended methane cuts of 35 to 47%. However, documents released under the Official Information Act revealed pressure from lobby groups like Federated Farmers, whose ex-president Andrew Hoggart is now an ACT Party MP, for the government to establish a separate panel to review the methane target, and that panel has, surprise, surprise, landed on a much weaker methane target. Is this government strangling the common good for their donors' interests?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just donors. I think you've also got to understand it in a system-wide issue, right? So we have this big, powerful dairy sector, which is, just has enormous influence on government decision-making on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing it in fresh water regulation as well. So basically there's cut after cut after cut in terms of regulations to protect fresh water.
Yep.
And it was the fresh water regulations that were producing significant reductions in agricultural emissions because the dairy herd had peaked and was starting to come down.
Right.
And that was largely driven by the rules around fresh water.
Yeah.
And so since they've weakened all the rules around fresh water, obviously Hoggart, the associate agriculture minister, the former president of Federated Farmers, now they've weakened all the rules around fresh water. We're seeing the dairy herd growing again. So you've probably got another 35 dairy cattle have been consented just in Canterbury alone.
Yes.
And it's that growth in the dairy herd particularly which is going to drive emissions forward. There's some things you can do within, if you maintain the dairy herd at the same level, you can get significant emissions reductions, which is what the Climate Change Commission was calling for. It was saying you can reduce emissions by up to 47%, even with existing herds. But it's also true that we've just got too many dairy cattle. So, Southland used to have 40,000 dairy cattle. It's now got 640,000 dairy cattle. In 30 years, we added 1.1 million dairy cattle into Canterbury. So we've just overdone the dairy cattle thing, and it's having a dramatic impact in terms of fresh water as well as climate change. And that's why Ngāi took its court action in the South Island to try to get some control over the regulation of rivers in the South Island, because central government has just let the dairy herd completely destroy them. And that's just the dominance of agribusiness within this particular government.
It seems whatever the problem is, national solution is more cows. In an open letter shared with the Financial Times, 26 climate scientists from around the world warned that New Zealand's proposed new methane targets risk setting a dangerous precedent. This government revived in June the 100% pure tourism brand in light of the methane decision. Isn't that tourism advert nothing but greenwash bullshit?
Yeah, it's plainly greenwash. I mean, the thing is what they're trying to do is redefine the science around methane warming. So they've used this no additional warming metric. And which is not supported by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's not supported by the New Zealand Parliamentary Commission for the Environment. It's not supported by the Climate Commission in New Zealand. And of course, on the front page of the Financial Times, it wasn't supported by the world's leading climate scientists either. And what they're saying is that if New Zealand gets away with this and changes the way that methane warming is considered, then it's going to have a dramatic impact in terms of enabling warming, because methane is such a potent warming gas. And so the global livestock industry is leading this campaign. New Zealand's part of it. The New Zealand government's part of it, but also Federated Farmers and Dairy NZ and Fonterra. And they're trying to unravel the science around methane warming. And so there's a big pushback as scientists all around the world are saying, we can't, if we let them get away with this huge increase in methane, then the impact in terms of climate change is dramatic. Whereas if we cut methane, we can also have pretty significant short-term effects. I mean, just today, there was the article in Nature about corals, suggesting that corals are at a tipping point because of bleaching events. Just repeated bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef, for instance, is just making it very difficult for those reefs to survive, even when in between bleaching events, because they're now so frequent because of global heating.
Dr. Bryce Edwards highlights that the recent local council elections had lobby groups like the Local Government Business Forum, a coalition including Business New Zealand, the New Zealand Initiative and Federated Farmers, openly calling for voters to elect candidates with commercial and financial acumen and a pro-growth and pro-development mindset. Is part of the problem here in New Zealand that business lobby groups can mask their polluter interests with dark ag money that the wider electorate can't see?
I mean, so particularly in the dairy areas, you certainly are seeing the big impact of those vested interests. And obviously we saw that in the Canterbury Regional Council election. You see it in Southland and elsewhere, where you've got these big dairy huge dairy herds and big dairy interests. But I mean, you could look at it a different way. It's like New Zealand's got this resource curse. Like some countries get oil and it becomes a resource curse. So we've got this dairy resource curse. And it's now just so dominant that it's kind of influencing public policy. Because the thing about the climate change decision that was made yesterday around methane is that if agriculture is let off the hook, so they don't have to cut their methane emissions, but we're still trying to meet our Paris climate agreements, then it means the whole rest of the economy has to cover the emissions, or we have to pay for overseas carbon credits, which obviously is silly and largely nonsense. But one way or another, the whole rest of the economy, everyone else living in New Zealand has to cover this if the dairy sector is given a free pass. On top of that, the dairy sector is highly subsidised through all this research around trying to find magic ways to reduce methane emission. The government says they've spent $400 million of taxpayer money subsidising this process. So you get an industry like dairy, which is like the oil industry in Saudi Arabia or something like that, which kind of sits there and dominates public policy, even though it's to the detriment of the broader economy and obviously to the detriment of climate and fresh water. But from a New Zealand perspective as a whole, it means that the special interests of the dairy agribusiness are dominating over the broader public interest, but also the broader economy and the interests of the broader economy.
Finally, Russell, many will feel very angry that once again the bloody corporate farming lobby have avoided paying for their pollution. What should people do if they want meaningful change?
Well, I mean, I think it really is important that people keep turning up to protest and keep expressing their opposition. I mean, we're 2 years into this government, which is engaged in this war on nature, and it's not just climate, it's fresh water, it's the oceans, the fishing industry, energy as well, obviously is a huge problem because they've been subsidising new oil and gas exploration. So, I mean, people are going to have to keep fighting and standing up for what's important if they want themselves and their kids to have a livable planet. Because what we do here, we're a small part of a global picture, right? But if New Zealand unravels, or like we're under the current government trying to unravel global climate agreements, it means the thing comes apart. And we need the big emitters like like China in particular, to be part of global agreements. And our role in that is to make sure the global agreements stick. And currently the New Zealand government's trying to unravel them to achieve the short-term interests of agribusiness. And so we have to keep speaking out about that really, really loudly, and demand at the next election that politicians of from all parties stand up for action on climate and to protect the environment. Because, for us and our kids, it's having a living planet's a great thing, and we don't want to see it destroyed.
Thank you, comrade. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is a former National Party MP and the current Press Gallery senior reporter for Aotearoa, the mightiest of the mighty, the indomitable Claudette Hauiti. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
Busy. Full on and busy.
Yeah. Terrifyingly busy?
Yeah. Engari, he ahua pauri hoki. Yeah.
Our next panellist is based in Epsom, but don't let that scare you. If David Seymour's Voldemort, she's his kryptonite. Labour Party spokesperson for ACC, Public Services and Emergency Management, Labour Party list MP Camilla Belich. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Doing there.
Hey! One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
Windy.
Windy. Our next panellist is the coolest Gen X journalist in New Zealand. Forget Mikey Havoc. Forget Russell Brown. Forget Noel McCarthy. The greatest was always Auckland business editor of The Post, Dita De Boni. Kia ora, comrade.
Kia ora.
One word to describe the week, please.
Has to be Gaza.
Gaza?
Yes.
Preach. And finally, last but certainly not least, he's a lover and a fighter, mostly a fighter. Former Talkback host, former Labour Party minister, hero who sued Mike Hosking for defamation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Māori Party president, John Tamihere. Kia ora, comrades. One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Relentless. On all things.
I can imagine. We'll get into it. Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's show. Issue 1, the OCR cut in the economy. Are things better now? Issue 2, local election results. Did democracy have a stroke? Issue 3, the Māori Party reset and the latest TVNZ poll. And issue 4 tonight, does Donald Trump deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? Plus, we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money is on John. It'll be John. Comrades, the Reserve Bank made a dramatic 50-point drop last week in the OCR as more and more economic data suggests the economy is in far worse shape than feared. Are we seeing prudent management or desperation? Dita, the latest leading indicators for the economy suggest a darkening outlook for September quarter GDP. The Business New Zealand BNZ PSI survey out yesterday showed the services sector that makes up over 60% of the economy contracted in September, its 19th consecutive month of contraction. The matching Business New Zealand BNZ PMI survey for the manufacturing sector on Friday also showed a contraction. You are a business journalist. How bad is it getting out there?
And so on and so on. At one point there were green shoots, but the green shoots have gone retracted back into the earth.
There was snot and hope.
We laugh about it, obviously. It's, of course, not funny. This week I went to interview someone from a charity called Fix Up Look Sharp, which dresses men to go to court or men to go to job interviews and things. And I spoke to this young guy there. He'd left school to do an electrical apprenticeship, hadn't worked out. He had put 200 job applications out and got 3 interviews. And, you know, that would beat down the best of us.
Sure.
You know, and I felt like crying at the end of that. I just thought, this country is just failing young people. If this young man who's here to get a suit, to try and get an interview, you know, I think, you know, obviously that's not the top line stuff that you're talking about, but that is the
reality,
real,
right?
Yeah, outcome of what we're seeing. In short, 2026, they're saying it's going to get better.
Follow-up question. Information out this morning shows the housing market continues to slide as QV report shows prices down 1.1% in the 3 months ended September, with the market marginally weaker than a year ago, down 14% from its peak in 2022. The New Zealand economy is built on selling each other overinflated houses and pretending that's wealth. When will things get better?
Well, I think it's 2026 again, but it is pretty sad that that's the wealth effect that makes people spend. So it's not even real money that makes people spend. It's the feeling that, oh, my house made $1 million over the last year. Choice. Let's go out and buy blah, blah, blah. It's not real money, you know, and it's not a real economy to have houses being traded back and forth.
Camilla, Stats New Zealand reported migration data yesterday showing a record high 73,900 New Zealanders immigrated in the year to the end of August. How much more of a damning indictment on the way the government has handled this economy is that?
I think it's a huge indictment, and I think Christopher Luxon was asked today in the House about a quote that he had said previously, that people go where the jobs are, and if people are going to Australia and leaving New Zealand, then I think that is a serious indictment on his leadership and the way that the economy is going. I think Dita's exactly right. Jobs is really the key thing that we're focused on, and we've seen 36,000 people lose their jobs under this government, 20,000 of those in construction, which of course is leading to helping other parts of the economy. So it's all very well to have an OCR cut, and people with mortgages obviously would be grateful for that. But if people aren't earning an income, they can't pay their mortgage no matter what the interest rate is. So it really is a dire situation at the moment for the economy and for working people. We just want to be able to pay their bills.
Follow-up question. Economic pessimism surged in early October to its worst level in 3 years in the One News Varian poll out last night. Why isn't this helping Labour politically?
Well, I think there's still a lot of time to go, of course, before the election, and you will see that Labour and National are polling, with most of the polls recently having Labour slightly ahead of National. Of course, there's a lot more that we need to do, and we haven't announced basically any of our manifesto for the next election. So I think people want to see not only the government, they obviously are losing faith in this government, but they also want to see what Labour has to offer and kind of the positive vision we have for New Zealand. So we really look forward to setting that out, and our hope is that once we do that, there will be a greater level of support.
Preach. John, overall, migrant arrivals dropped 16% to 138,600, while departures increased 13% to 127,900. The economy is so bad that now even the migrant workers are fleeing. How bad will it get?
Oh, look, I hate being a doomsdayer, but the OCR cuts in a standard economy going back in history in Aotearoa, did stimulate confidence. The problem with this government is, or this regime, is that they borrowed big money to pay for their tax cuts. Those tax cuts went to the top end of town. Those tax cuts did not prime the economy, right?
No, that's right.
So all that money went sideways, but the borrowings went up. They then, as Camilla has said, and kakosi dobra, Camilla. So I just wanted to say, as soon as you depower construction, and Camilla has said that, the knock-on economic impacts from sales of retail, you name it, the servicing of the tradies and so on and so forth.
It's a cascade, isn't it?
Well, it's one of the most wonderful abilities to prime an economy. Now, when the GDP of the country is, whoever's counting, between 40 and 44% is government in New Zealand, because it's a small economy, small country, that gives confidence to people to take money out of the pocket, so long as they know that the government has these policies that are specific to these expenditures on these items. That's just not true under this mob. What they did is put the handbrake on and pick their mates. Now, you just can't depower construction like that because of the knock-on impacts. And I could go on, but I've just made a couple of extraordinarily important points about confidence. So you can have OCR rate cuts, as you should, because of the way in which this economy has been tanked. But unless you have a bunch of other policy prescriptions in there that give confidence,
it's not going to work, right?
Not going to work.
Follow-up question. Treasury papers show that we have an $11.1 billion deficit, but the government, and this is the point you were making, has given away $19.5 billion to landlords, the rich, and tobacco companies. If they hadn't done that, we would have an $8.4 billion surplus. Has this government manufactured a debt problem?
No, they didn't manufacture it. They knowingly insured it. Winston Peters is on the record saying that he believed that they should not have done those tax cuts until they had a better view of the economy in the year after. Yeah. Right? Because they were still consuming the impact of COVID and COVID expenditure. So they didn't have a clear line of sight, but they proceeded because National promised it. So we are getting dished up what was always going to be a consequence if you worked it out from the get-go.
Claudette, for many whānau who are renting, this OCR drop will do nothing for them. Who's looking after their interests?
So it came out, October the 8th, the latest announcements, or last week, and that was the question I immediately asked the Minister for Finance, Nicola Willis. What's it going to do for the whānau living in Clendon, for the single mummy, for my niece who is suffering from cancer in Moerewa? What's it going to do for them? And she waxed on about how it's going to relieve pressure off those who have mortgages, but none of the whānau that I spoke to her about have mortgages, so it's not going to impact on them whatsoever. So she is talking to a certain type of people, but she's not talking to the mass number that feel that crunch that she says is going to work for New Zealand, and it is about growth. So that whole free market deal of the trickle-down effect isn't making any headway for our whānau, isn't reaching our whānau in any way whatsoever. And they're the ones that are asking, but when can I see more money in my pocket? Yeah. When can I get more than a loaf of bread in my next groceries? When can I catch that bus to catch that train? When can my tamariki have a new pair of shoes?
Follow-up question. You did a powerful series for Wātea on homelessness and you stayed overnight in the cars with them. What is this government doing for those whānau?
Well, and interestingly, today in the House, Tama Pōtaka was asked about social housing as well, and Kieran McNulty had asked him, had raised a particular situation, and the minister had said that he had spoken directly to that person, but actually hadn't. So while the minister understands that these things are happening, and, I personally believe that he feels deeply for these people.
Yes, he does.
And I personally feel that he realises that these policies are punitive and they do not make any difference to our whānau at that pointy end. It's not making any difference. Now, what we've seen, though, what happened to me was that I was with Soup Kitchen in Rotorua, and we were feeding those that were visible whānau, those that we expect to be homeless, those that have mental health issues, that are on the streets, that have alcohol issues. Those are the ones that we see. But the ones I slept with, they're the invisible whānau, the ones that do not want to be seen, the ones who have tamariki, who do not want to be seen because they might come under come under the radar of those organisations that might pick up their tamariki. So those are the thousands of other whānau that we're not seeing, that those policies are also hitting. And they're working families. We've got some mummies who have got 3 jobs, working 3 jobs, dads working 2 jobs, and their kids are going to after-school care. Then they're taking care of themselves, but they're trying their best to look good, dress their kids beautifully every single day so that nobody pings them as homeless.
How shameful in a country that used to be egalitarian. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is the local council elections, which saw a pitiful 32% turnout, which was lower than the previous low point of 36%. Camilla, this isn't voter apathy, this is voter antipathy. How can any council pretend to have any mandate when barely a third voted?
I think it's a really important issue, and local body authorities do a lot of really important work in the community. So I think it is really important that we have a higher turnout. And I do think that there's probably more that we could do to assist with that. I think not many people use the post box these days. Not many people know where to find one. Someone come up to you on the street, where is the local post shop? And you have to stop and think. Whereas in years gone by, you would have utilised that a lot. So times have changed, and having postal voting, I think, has created some barriers for people. So obviously, it's run differently from the general elections. The Election Commission runs those elections. We do have higher turnout. Maybe there's some lessons to be learned from that, but I generally don't think that people are apathetic. I think when people realise what's happening and they are engaged in issues, they usually will have an opinion one way or the other. And so I think it's really not that people don't care. It's more that we've probably put together a structural situation which makes it difficult for people to engage and to have their voice heard. So I do think there's important questions that need to be asked.
Follow-up question. Dr. Bryce Edwards notes that right-wing AstroTurf groups were highly effective in pushing their messages, and ACT gained 10 seats. When will the left be able to match the influence of these right-wing groups?
Well, I think that, I don't know that particular situation, but I think when funding is involved, that's always something that on the left we've struggled with compared to some of those other groups historically. And I think that there have been a lot of attempts from groups on the left. I live in Auckland, and City Vision had some really good wins over the weekend and gained majority on some of the local boards that hasn't seen for a while. So there have been some successes in that area too. So I haven't kind of done the analysis of has it been left, has it been right, but certainly from my perspective, compared to the last local body elections, there seem to be a few areas where the left had done particularly well. So I think we need to look at that. What was working? How did we structure that? How can we support good people to stand for local body councils is a really important question.
John, since we privatised the elections to just 2 companies in the 1990s, participation rates went from 55% to 32%. Is it time for us to dump the privatisation of our local elections and actually have the Electoral Commission do them with the same level of resource we do with national elections?
No, I don't think it's as simple as that. The issue, which we're all touching on, is that there's a number of other jurisdictions where voting is by device, like a digital process. That seems to be a remarkably common sense thing to break out too. That's what needs to happen. So what you've got to do with new cohorts and new technology is to follow the cohorts and the technology, And that's one of our biggest problems, is going online voting. So that's the first point. The second point is in local government, people, you have to understand that nearly 60% of Kiwis don't have a stake in their house.
Right.
They're renting.
Right.
They don't give a stuff.
Yeah.
They're not a stakeholder like in previous iterations of our generations. And so if you don't understand where your social economic cohorts are, you're making value judgments that don't count. So you have to understand who you're working with, what the numbers are, and what motivates them to stay at home or get out.
Yep.
Okay, so you've got to, one, make voting far more accessible and easy, and two, you've got to target that these people are stakeholders.
Yeah.
Who do have to pay because their rents go up when rates go up.
Follow-up question. 42 councils held referendums on the Māori wards. 17 areas voted to keep them, while 25 have voted to remove them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know exactly where the rednecks live. So you can drop a pin now.
Preach. Claudette, before 2022, we only had 3 Māori wards. After this, we now have 20. That's progress, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Look, absolutely. Can I just go back to those numbers? So as a total block, there were more that voted to retain Māori wards, over 400, almost 485,000, I think it was,
yes.
and under 400,000, 300 and something voted to throw out those Māori wards. So as a collective national number, more voted to retain them than to turf them out. So that's something to celebrate. And then we look at the types of wards that voted. Unfortunately, there were a couple of very high populated Māori areas like Whangare that didn't come out and vote, and they lost their Māori wards. But then we saw, the Wellington Regional Council.
Yeah.
As a block, the percentage of Māori is lower than in some other areas, and they came out overwhelmingly to retain their Māori wards.
Yeah.
So it also, dare I say it, also depends on the education of those those non-Māori that were voting in those areas as well. But at the end of the day, we didn't get the vote out, and Māori could have come out in bigger numbers.
Sure.
But that goes back to your point around marketing. No, the elections, whatever they're called, did a horrific job leaving profiles of candidates of Māori wards out of the booklets, as an example in Whangare, and then saying, whoops, sorry, my bad, won't happen again.
Wanganui, Manawatu, on and on.
Yeah.
Hastings.
And the Prime Minister said, whoops, well, no, that's not anything to do with me. I don't have anything to do with that. Asked all the other stakeholding ministers. I, even had a bit of a tussle with the local government minister over a period of days, and he also sort of fobbed off that. So, and we really do need to have targeted types of marketing. Now, there was that really good Māori roll call, and not because he's sitting over there, but that
it was pretty good.
Māori roll call
ad,
that kind of thing,
will
really resonates with our people to get them to the polls, even though they are struggling and they have hour-to-hour issues. Some of that stuff really pulls at the heartstrings. That's what we need. We don't need any more advertising and campaign coming from some policy wonk from some bureaucratic.
Follow-up question. In 66 mayoral races, nearly half elected a new mayor based on high rates rise revolts. Rate rises that were ironically caused because this government dismantled Three Waters and pushed the costs back onto locals. How is Three Waters looking now?
Yeah, so when I went around to talk to Māori candidates in the Māori wards, all of them talked about how the non-Māori constituents wanted the rates to come down. But Māori was saying, well, they could have if we had retained some of these policies like Three Waters. And then there were even some candidates who told constituents, non-Māori constituents, you're dreaming. You're dreaming if you think that your rates are going to drop. And anybody that tells you that is lying to you.
Yeah. Dita, Sunday Star Times' Andrea Vance said of the results, and I quote, "The public is both disillusioned and disengaged. With turnout this dire, the local government sector needs to have a long, hard look at itself." Is she right?
I think that's true. But I mean, I think for things, for example, like Māori Wards, I did wonder myself, have these efforts gone out to really, because, I mean, first of all, people shouldn't be voting on whether there's a Māori seat on these. That should not be a vote at all. Exactly. But it is such a critical issue, I would think, for Māori. And I know that, notwithstanding there are issues that people at whānau are dealing with every day. But, this was something for Māori leaders, I feel, to really, and they could have gone to town because, God, the people on the other side of this debate are just so...
Yeah. Follow-up question, who do you feel more sorry for? Anyone who was forced to appear on a Hobson's Pledge billboard or the $90,000 Rolex that Ray Chung had put aside to buy when he won the Wellington Mayoralty? Who do you feel more sorry for?
Yeah. That's a tough one. I think what happened from my perspective is that Wellington sucked the life out of many other elections because it was just so rollicking. It was such a drama, a soap opera. And I think actually the Auckland one is the really important one. And actually I feel like the left really dropped the ball on that one. Yeah. 3 years ago, they should have been planning that. Yes. That's so important. Yes. Why was there no... I mean... Yes. Did have a candidate. She wasn't endorsed. I don't know why that is. Yep. Might be a good reason, but you should have a candidate. That is ridiculous.
It was. Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is the Māori Party reset in the latest TVNZ poll. The Māori Party reset is maybe the most important political event this year as Te Pāti Māori makes it clear they want to work constructively with the Greens and Labour to get rid of this government. John, with another haka suspension. Rawiri not wanting to answer stupid questions and serious allegations of overspending by one of your MPs, whose son had bewilderingly criticised you, can Te Pāti Māori step up to the challenge of getting rid of this government that so many left-wing voters want?
Well, look, all I can tell you is that the movement's going extraordinarily well, and the litmus test for that was the outcome in the Tamaki Makaurau by-election.
Absolutely.
And we were up against a party that spent 110 to 1. They had 3 hoardings up for every one of ours and so on and so forth. So it was quite an astonishing turnaround.
It was an incredible victory.
Off a 43 margin.
Yes.
In the last election. So there's a move on. The largest voter cohort out of our 7 seats, and 4 of them is 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah.
This is credible.
Yeah.
Right, so what Hannah Maipi Clark has brought to the table, she's got a billion views on TikTok. Yeah. She's the most watched Kiwi politician ever in the history of the country. Orini is clocked up 17 million already.
Wow.
Okay, so there's a international Indigenous network watching this, as well as pride in our younger communities coming up. We now have 8 seats on enrolled and registered numbers, heading to 9 for 2026. Yep. So all of the indicators are heading in the right direction. We just have to put personal interest and entitlement to one side, and bank on the movement. So the reality is, in terms of the question that you have asked, is we are going to be there. Now, the extent to which we're going to be there, we don't know. But just pretend we get 7 seats, because we're after the seats. Party vote. Yep. We can slide that one away. Yes. But at 7 seats and getting 3.5%, you're looking at least 2 overhang seats.
That's right.
In a close election,
that's the difference, right?
Well, on a close election, it's more than a difference. Yes. And so our buddies on the left have to learn how to count. Yep. Because we are a first past the post party in respect to us wanting to run our rohe. And if you run your rohe, you have your mandate. So as long as people understand our thinking, and we don't want to attack other parties, but we do want to hold our vote. And it's you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work this out. There's only one Te Pāti Māori. Yeah.
Now, Uru said some pretty full-on things about the Te Pāti Māori leadership. We've had overnight revelations on the other side of that story. Those revelations make his criticisms look very hollow, do they not?
Well, I don't want to go there.
I know.
Hang on. All I want to say is the right tikanga is to tell our truth, but not run around all the media, work all the back door, okay? We're a party that is trying to play our tikanga, right? We don't like heads on platters. Everyone chases those. So we don't have the same way of looking at things, okay? And so Eru Kapakingi and his whānau have to determine whether they're in the movement for self-advancement or not. And if they are, well, then go and advance yourself, but don't do it at the expense of a movement. So they'll work their way through that. Our party is on the rage everywhere. Look, we've got the theft of our foreshore and seabed rights.
Yes, right now.
Despite Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, High Court.
Right.
We've got the regulatory standards bill before the House,
Yep.
which is the real play that the treaty principles legislation tried to play.
Yep.
But this one is a Trojan horse and does the same thing. Right. So for 50 years of incrementalism, where Māori have played the game in this constitution, it's all been turned over in the space of months under this regime.
Yeah.
That's why we call it a fascist one. Because what it does is it works on identifying why we should dislike one another, burn the bridges, and blame all our problems on the Māoris, blame all the problems on whoever, right? The wokes, the LGBTs, you name it. This mob will blame it. Here's the problem. They've taken their off the ball on the economy.
Yes.
Because it's been a culture war over the last 2.5 years. That's where all the energy's gone.
Yeah.
Now, huge numbers of non-Māori are very sympathetic to us.
Yep.
Yeah, to suggest that all... Look, Muhammad Ali put it this way. If I could go offshore.
Oh, Jesus. I know many of his quotes. Oh, God, I'm going to hide under the...
Well, no, this guy who was a white guy was interviewing him and said to him, look, I support black rights and all this sort of stuff. And he said, no, it's Afro-American. Anyway, where did he land on this? He said, well, you have to see it from my view. See, there's 20,000 rattlesnakes out there, and they seem to be all coming for me.
Yeah.
10,000 of them are good. The other 10,000 are not. Yeah. Here's my problem. I don't know who's good.
Dita, the latest TVNZ poll is showing that despite the economic meltdown and all the dreadful things ACT, National and New Zealand First have done, they're still clinging to power. Why?
I just don't think Labour has really put across, Labour and... I mean, I think the parties of the left are doing that individually, and they're formulating what they need to have. But they haven't really put a proposal, a really compelling proposal, a counter-proposal at the moment. I mean, you know, we should be hearing all the time, and I think Christopher Hitkins is sort of coming up with a few things, but he's not getting the airtime that he probably should to make the case. And that goes for the leaders of the other left-wing parties as well. And they do get caught up on these things, such as the broken window at Winston Churchill's house.
Yes, all of that sort of thing.
And actually, the parties of the right are better at politics, let's just be honest.
Sure.
They really are.
Claudette, every party has internal issues. Just this year, Mihi Forbes exclusively highlighted ACT Party candidate Leo Foley discussing David Seymour's alarming warning during their interview about causing a civil war related to the treaty. That story evaporated in 24 hours, yet with Te Pāti Māori, it's the end of the Westminster system of democracy. Is Rawiri right? Is there a double standard when it comes to Māori politics?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and you can't deny that, and I like to look at the actual construct of Western journalism as to why it can't cope with whakapapa Māori journalism. Now there is a state and being with Te Ao Māori on how you cover Māori stories. You can still go after the gotcha stuff. You can still do the jugular and leave everybody with their mana intact. But our Pākehā journalism, well, we don't get taught that because that's not within their, pedagogy. That's not them.
Yeah.
But we're seeing more and more of that as Māori are demanding their space and time and their mana intact when you write about them, and they're saying no a lot more. Or if they're not saying no, they're actually telling you stuff that's completely off the radar and you can't quite get a sense of where the story is going for them, so they end up in a black hole somewhere and they can't run a story.
Yep.
I mean, that's happening quite a lot now, I see, where our whānau are now sending them down a back alley, and
Right.
they're ending up nowhere because
Right.
they just don't get where they're coming from. So I think from a journalistic perspective, there does need to be a reshift or a really good look and deep dive into whakapapa journalism that incorporates mana tangata and also the tikanga and the āhua. And a lot of people call it tone or reframing if you want to use kupu Pākehā.
Yep.
It's about the framing and it's about the tone within a te ao Māori aspect. Of course, you can take the piss out of people, you can berate them, but everybody at the end of the day leaves with their mana intact.
Right.
And that you can achieve that.
Right. Camilla, I don't think Chippy is a socialist hero who will bring about the people's utopia, but I do believe he is a decent human being with a heart who would not have agreed to any of the spiteful stuff this government have embarked upon. Yet he's getting no love in the TVNZ poll. What's going on?
Well, I've known Chippy for over 20 years. He's a really decent guy. The
Right.
reason he's in politics is because he wants to make a difference
Exactly.
to people. He's, was passionate about education as education minister. And I think the reality is when you're the leader of the opposition, you don't get as much airtime as the Prime Minister. And you would have seen, you see with all Prime Ministers when they change to being leader of the opposition, or even Christopher Luxon when he was leader of the opposition, you do have that difference in what people see of you and also how you're performing. And there is a kind of premium that goes with being with the Prime Minister. So I think we are making progress. As we've said before, we've got a lot of policy that we need to announce and a lot of our vision that we need to share with New Zealanders, but we know what our priorities are, and those are focusing on jobs, health and homes, and on the cost of living for New Zealanders. So I think those are issues that do resonate with New Zealanders. I think those are issues that we have in common with many parties on the left, and I think that when we put forward policies to focus on those issues, those will resonate with New Zealanders as well. Of course, there's a long way to go. We're very optimistic about it.
Sure. I also get the sense, though, with Chippy, that it is a value statement. I just don't see that he would have done half the needlessly cruel stuff that we've seen from this government. That he as a person just wouldn't have agreed to those things. Do you think New Zealanders are going to warm to that as we get close to the election?
I think people are really shocked about what this government has done and how far they have. I mean, I think Christopher Luxon has really let the ACT Party and the New Zealand First Party to a certain extent deliver his policy agenda. And the Treaty Principles Bill was an example of something that would be totally unacceptable to Chris Hipkins, to our party, to New Zealand, I think. And I think that's one example. Also, the pay equity changes that went through, totally shocking. These are things that we couldn't have anticipated. They were not, the Treaty Principles was something that ACT campaigned on, but pay equity changes, there was no mandate for that.
Yeah.
And it's just a mean-spirited way of making the budget balance.
Exactly.
And it's something that a Labour government would never do. And it's not how we show that we value New Zealanders by taking away pay from our lowest paid workers.
Preach. Comrades, we need to move on to our last issue tonight. With the Israeli hostages finally released after 2 brutal years of war crimes and horrifying violence, does Donald Trump deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? Dita?
No, obviously. But he does deserve a bit of credit for a few things. Bowman Qatar was the last straw, so he finally used his leverage. He has had a big ceremony happen. The whole world's watching, all the leaders come. I think that's a way of sort of cementing in the peace as far as you can. And also he's asked for Bibi Netanyahu to be pardoned, which of course I think even a lot of people in Israel find disgusting. But it might be a way that the war doesn't go back into being, because we all know that he's doing this to maintain his rule. So if he's allowed to just slip out the back door, it's possible. Is it possible? I don't know. But is it possible that maybe some sort of peace? There will never be real, genuine peace, of course. But
Camilla, does Donald deserve the Nobel Peace Prize?
I would also agree with Dita, and I think the important thing is that I think while we're on the subject of famous quotes, that the absence of war, peace is not the absence of war. There also needs to be steps taken in order to establish ongoing peace. And so that's why we were really disappointed by the fact that the government wouldn't recognise Palestine. Right. We think that it's very important in order to have a two-state solution, you actually need to have two recognised states. And so that, I think, is really key. And, I think if including Donald Trump want to commit themselves to a peace process, it does have to include focusing on what comes next and establishing long-term peace for that region.
Claudette, does Donald deserve the Nobel Peace Prize?
Ka hore. At no level, in no way, in any way, shape or form. And this is all just theatrics. This is all performative. That seems to be a bit of a buzzword at the moment. This is all theatrics, and you cannot possibly think that this guy is a guy that wants long-lasting peace. I mean, his country sells arms. His country bombs people, and you want to give the leader of a country that sells arms, that kills babies and bombs other countries that kill babies and women, a peace prize?
Preach. John.
Both wars, Ukraine as well as Palestine, could have been averted if the United States had applied a no-fly zone over both. As soon as you depower either drones or air power, you've now got an ugly little contest on the ground where people then start to become, the equilibrium starts to kick in. They refused to do that. The Yanks then started to fund both wars by delivering armaments.
Right.
They then did a dirty deal with Ukraine to take their ores.
Yeah.
Here into eternity to pay for what they were providing Ukraine, right? So the Yanks are always going to make money out of the rebuild. So I just want to posit that and put it out there because it's a fact. Second issue I want to raise about Gaza and Palestine is what does peace look like to Gazans and Palestinians?
Yeah.
That we're not being shot and bombed every day?
Yeah.
Is that the end of it? What is our life? What is our look? What does it look like in terms of being in the largest prison without barbed wire around me?
Right.
But now I am totally controlled by whoever. I'm not allowed to elect whoever I want. They're slaves.
Yeah.
So this peace deal is enslaved the Palestinian peoples. I just find it reprehensible, and that answers the question as to why Nobel Prize is a pointless conversation.
Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Claudette, your final word this week, please, ma'am.
Well, I want to congratulate all our whānau that did come out to vote, and I want to congratulate the rest of those that voted to retain the Māori wards. But while we might have lost that small battle, we're moving towards winning the war, and I want to remind our whānau to keep an eye out on what will happen post the Maka debate and the reading in Parliament and where it's up to now, because that battle is not yet over.
Right. Dita, your final word?
Sorry to be a geopolitics dweeb, but I think the US-China escalating trade war is going to be a big theme of the week. And I know Donald Trump sort of stepped back and he stepped forward, but this is massive. Like, China has actually put a line in the sand, and that could be very, meaningful.
Camilla, your final word this evening, please.
I was in Fiji last week for a UNDP program focusing on democracy, and so that's kind of my final word, is just like focusing on the importance of democracy and what we can all do together to strengthen our own democracy and also those in our neighbouring areas as well. I think it's incumbent on all of us to focus on important pillars like that during these difficult times.
Preach. Thank you. John, your final word this evening.
Oh, look, Te Pāti Māori has been under incessant pressure and attack in the House in terms of trying to defend our people. In doing that, you're seen as being radical and you're positioned in non-Māori narratives. So all I want to say is we're moving to a reset heading into 2026, and there'll be a lot more to be said about that as we go on the front foot to be solution makers rather than defenders of our people's rights and entitlements. What would those rights and entitlements look like without this regime in place? So this is where we're heading, and so watch the space.
Thank you, comrades. And now to my final word. Brothers and sisters, look, I don't care about Labour's incrementalism. I don't care about the Greens' middle-class wokeness, and I don't care about the Māori Party's bolshy defiance that scares the bejesus out of some white people. I just don't care anymore. Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori on their worst days are 10,000 times better than this hateful, spiteful, hard-right government with their anti-Māori, anti-treaty, anti-worker, anti-beneficiary, anti-disabled, anti-environment agenda, where they strangle the common good for their donors' interests. The cruelty with which National, ACT and New Zealand First use the power of government to punish their enemies while benefiting their donors should be a screaming scandal. The next election will be Old Zealand versus New Zealand. Pick a side. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
The Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Aotearoa News. After the show,